Welcome to Antarctica Did That For Me. We're a podcast for everyday people with a little adventure in their hearts. We're Keri and Cassa, and we've spent huge chunks of our time living and working in Antarctica. Welcome to a journey that changed our lives. We hope it will change yours too.
Welcome to another episode of Antarctica Did That For Me. I am one of your hosts, Cassa Grant, and I'm here with the wonderful Keri Nelson.
Oh my gosh, thanks, Cassa. You're wonderful too.
And this topic is a really cool one. It came from one of our listeners, actually. This came from a friend of mine who she actually sailed from Mexico to New Zealand. It took her about a year. So she's a deep water sailor. And her question was, I'm really curious about how you managed your mental health during the winters that you spent down there. And so I thought, yep, this is a great episode topic. We're going to go into it. So Keri, you were just telling me a little bit about this, but before you had your first winter, what were you thinking about and how were you conceiving of what your experience might be and especially as it relates to your mental health?
One of my main goals going into a winter, not just a summer in Antarctica, but wintering over when at that time all the planes flew away and they weren't coming back. It was kind of like a person versus nature, that old kind of literary trope. But could I make it? Could I make it through an Antarctic winter without losing my mind, without going, just going to some really dark places? And I was like, no, I will not. I had read, blogs about going to Antarctica. I'd heard about winter overs. And when we arrived, the summer before, the winter overs were cranky and everyone's like, just leave them alone, give them space, talk gently to them, which I understand now that I've been a winter over. But as a new person coming in, that was like really threatening. Like, they are very scary people. And anyway, I'm like, I won't be like them. I just won't, says the young and naive Keri Nelson coming into her first winter. And I think, I learned in subsequent winters that I was wrong, that I absolutely can go to some dark places in Antarctica in the middle of winter. But that winter, that very first winter, I didn't. I think I just had it as my little Pollyanna goal that I was not going to be defeated by that. And I had a really happy winter. And it was subsequent winters that I learned I wasn't as strong as I thought I was.
So for me too, my first winter, this was the number one thing I was afraid of. I was thinking, oh my God, how is this going to affect my mental health? I mean, I had struggled with depression in my early 20s. I'd gone on antidepressants for a while, which really helped me a lot. And I was afraid of what it felt like falling back into a hole that I wouldn't be able to get myself out of, or that I wouldn't be able to manage or deal with or learn from, right? So I was out at the airfield watching that last plane take off, and I was thinking, oh man, I might have made a huge mistake. Like, this could have been a really bad choice.
It's a feeling watching that last plane take off. It's a feeling. It is. It's like, oh,
I'm here 6 months, yeah, this is happening.
These people, who are you people? Do I want to be here with you for 6 months?
Exactly.
Sometimes is the answer. Sometimes.
Yeah. And so for me, this is when I actually really got much more serious about taking care of myself physically, so that I could help my mental health too. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But I did a lot more research on what would be likely to happen when you were having, 4 months of complete darkness, but even also the isolation as well. I kind of had an idea, being from a very rural area in Montana, around the isolation part to a degree, but I did some research and I really started to get more intentional about how I was taking this challenge on. And I think that was a huge lesson for me, especially that first winter.
So what did you come up with? Like, what did you learn, or what did you find was most effective for you, Cassa Grant?
Well, I mean, there's many, many things, but I think that just physically, the number one thing I learned about was seasonal affective disorder and happy lights. I was like, oh,
they work. They really work.
There's a physiological thing around sunlight that really makes a big difference. And I think I kind of knew, my cousin had lived in Seattle, so I knew about happy lights a little bit, but I got a huge happy light. I actually had to make a little shelter around it because I was working like a customer service role, and I would do it in the mornings for about an hour. People would just be like, what is this blinding light? It was like, they'd walk past the counter we were at and just be like, oh my God. And so I put a little box around it, so it was just basically hitting me and not bothering anyone else.
Do you want to talk about the concept of that for anybody who's listening who's not familiar with what you're talking about with a happy light?
Essentially what it is that you need to have what's called up to 10,000 LUX of of bright light in your eye for a certain amount of time every day, and it helps reset your circadian rhythm. Basically, it helps you produce melatonin. It helps the serotonin come up. When you don't get that, that's when you start to have serious sleep disruptions and those kinds of things. So, I mean, I use it in San Francisco. I use it here in New Zealand in the winter because for me, it actually is not necessarily more about mood. It's more about energy. Like I just start to get really draggy and really like ugh, in the winter. And I think part of it is that light thing is really important for me. And yeah, it really makes a difference. It just helps me sleep better, frankly, and have better energy during the day.
I know that they would set up some rooms, when I was at McMurdo Station over the winter with some of the lights that were full spectrum lights that you were encouraged to go in and sit and use. There was a time there was an actual greenhouse at McMurdo Station, which has now been disassembled because it was just not a safe building anymore. But it really did make a difference to soak up some of that light when it's 24-hour darkness. Your body does just kind of need that.
Because there's physiological things happening there that are affecting your mental health.
Let's talk about T3, because this is something, T3 syndrome, that Antarcticans who've wintered over will say, and nobody knows what we're talking about. But there is a phenomenon that we call T3ing. T3 is I understand, this is a little bit of a sciencey explanation, but there are, for your thyroid to work properly, there are a bunch of different little steps that happen. One little step activates another to make your thyroid function. But one of those little steps is called T3, and it's sunlight builds that chemical. So when you've wintered over for a season, and especially if you start doing cumulative seasons, you start to become deficient in that. And the effect is that you become very mentally foggy. I know that my words really, especially year 2 or 3, I did 4 winters in a row. I've done 6 winters total. By the 4th winter, I was really deficient. I was word searching all the time. My memory did not work. There was a time when I took trash out in the middle of a snowstorm and didn't remember doing it. I went looking for the trash and realized I had gone out in a snowstorm, thrown it away, and had no memory of that. That's T3. It's really sobering. Like it really makes you think, gosh, even my own willpower of trying to hold it together is not allowing me to hold it together. I didn't actually find that one mentally distressing, but I'm sure that there were other ways that I was depressed, not even in a clinical way, but just muted. I remember one winter that I thought was just great. I thought I was happy. I thought I was one of the winter overs in the best mood. I thought I had sailed right through. But as soon as people came in for the summer season, the new kerfuffle and activity and joy and excitement, my mood went up to like level 99, and I never even knew it wasn't 99. That's what winters do to you. You don't recognize yourself even when you think that you do.
I will say, like, what I learned from this that helps me today is also just like, I can't remember it and I'm not going to worry about not remembering it. Right. They call it winter brain. The example that you had about the trash is a really good one. It's definitely things like that. I used to fight it really hard and be like, I should remember this and I know this better and da 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 da. But a lot of times, especially towards July and August, when you've been down there for a while and everybody has this happening, you're just kind of like, winter brain. You just don't care. I don't remember.
It's a real scene.
It's a real scene. I don't remember, and I don't care that I don't remember. Right?
And nobody around you remembers or has the power to care if they remember either. You're just like walking around the snow globe.
But I think that's a great way to think about some of this with acceptance around the mental health too, because I think that the people that did struggle more were the ones that fought it more and were the ones who were like, I should remember.
What are some other things that you did to keep yourself feeling centered?
One of the questions our listener had shared was what was happening with your sleep patterns and then also like with your work schedule. So luckily in the winter, as McMurdo in particular, there are a few people who are on 24-hour ops. So they're actually working like the night shift. I mean, even though it's dark all the time. In the winter, generally speaking, most people had a pretty steady schedule. So that did help a lot. I really noticed it in May. That's when the sun has basically set. We're definitely moving into the full winter. And about 3 weeks, I feel like, at the beginning of May, if people aren't taking their vitamin D3, if they're not doing happy lights or something along those lines, these are the people that really, really struggle. One of my friends didn't sleep for 3 weeks. He kind of would get cat naps here and there, but he could not get to sleep. And he was...
That's an awful feeling.
Struggling.
I've been there. It's awful.
Oh, it is. It's horrible.
You feel desperate.
Oh, man. And just so out of it. So out of it. I think he started taking vitamin D as well.
I never did.
Oh, you never took it?
Vitamin D, any of those?
Interesting.
I probably should have.
I
just
was
didn't.
religious about it. I was like, ooh, this is something I definitely want part of this. I don't know. I felt like I could see the difference between some folks who were taking it and some people who weren't. That is one of the things that I really noticed. And that physiological change starts in May. And then as you start to progress through the winter, the excitement of being there in the winter starts to wear off and the monotony of the day to day starts to really set in.
Groundhog Day on steroids.
Groundhog Day on steroids, the same people every day, the same situations.
Same clothes.
Same clothes.
Like, because you only have so many clothes down there.
Same food.
I remember looking at pictures of parties we had down there and gatherings. You could only tell what time of year that was or what month that happened by the decorations or the theme of the party, because everybody was wearing the same clothes. We'd been wearing them for months. It's not like you had new outfits to wear. You were just wearing some variation of the same t-shirts and pants that you'd had and been wearing forever. So it's just like Groundhog Day, even in that way too.
And then you get into kind of what they call just July, right? Like the doldrums of July. Like July is like, we know the light's coming. We just got to get through July, right? Most of the time when you saw breakups, when you saw like serious challenges was generally going to be in July in my experience. And definitely when I would get more short with people or I would start to find myself just getting more not who I wanted to be in terms of how I was relating to other people was generally going to be in July, or it wouldn't fly in August. You're just getting really tired by August as well. So
I just had this light bulb go on over my head. I actually met my husband down there in July of the first winter.
So clearly it was a different thing for you.
4th.
Oh, cool.
Know. I mean, was that a product of, I don't know. I'm going to question that now. Not really. But I think that's really funny because you're right. That is July. We didn't even know each other for all of that winter until that July. So that was our something new. And
that's cool. That's so cool. Yes, I started exercising at lunch. We do this thing called Just Dance, which is this really dorky video game. And I love this video game so much. And so every day at lunch, after we had our lunch, we would do some Just Dance. And now I'm like, oh, wow, that was such a great thing because not only were we getting that physical exercise, but it was really fun. And we were getting that like dose of fun every day, that dopamine hit every single day.
And socialness.
Yeah. And that social aspect of it, the music. I mean, it was just such an important thing for me personally.
I suspect another thing that came out of that is that because it was similar people doing that activity, that you were, the secondary effect is you were looking out for each other. Like you would have noticed if the people who came to that event every day were having a hard time, and looking out for each other is a huge part of mental health in Antarctica, especially in the winter.
Like, yeah, moving your body. Different people do different things. There's the gym, there's yoga classes, there's all these kinds of things to help you continue to move your body. The other thing that I found that I did that was physical, I think, was the diet. So we get frozen vegetables and frozen things like that. So it's not like we're not getting, it's just like, here's your meat and potatoes and your gruel or whatever. Like that's not the case at all.
It's better than gruel.
It's much better than gruel. But for me, I started to really notice, like I'm a pretty boring eater, to be honest. I'll eat the same lunch every day. But I started to notice when I started to eat different things, how it was affecting me emotionally, physically, and mentally. That was when I, again, started to pay more attention to this kind of thing, even though I wasn't able to get things that really make me feel good. But it was things that really helped me just show up with energy and a better attitude, frankly.
Cassa, you are telling me all the things that I should have been doing during the winter, because I did none of those things during the winter, including get much exercise. I wasn't an exerciser at all, except for I like to wander around on walks, like in the dark and look for auroras. So I did do a lot of walking, but I'm not a gym girl, and I wasn't really a Just Dance girl. My mental health in winter was a music game. You know, I became better and better at the music that I did. I was writing music all the time. I had a little studio of my own things that I set up in my room and recorded music, crappy music, you know, but I think, and it was the same thing, just trying to be mentally healthy. I don't know if writing sad music is mentally healthy at all. I think sometimes that's worse, but that's what I was doing. And, you know, that was something that I really turned to, as the creativity game in winters. And in the good winters, there were a lot of partners in crime in that effort. I mean, there's a winter that I was there, we made a whole soap opera. We did big fashion shows with fashions from the store. We made videos for each other. We made up all sorts of games. And so mine was more of a creativity game. But when I hear you saying I should have been eating vitamin D and exercising, that just makes sense. And I probably should have been doing that. I wasn't.
That I really started to think about, like, how are my physiological inputs affecting my mental health? And it's sad that it took a winter in Antarctica to make me even start to think about this, to be honest. It's true. I mean, I was 32 years old and I was like, ooh, this is something I need to pay attention to a little bit more than I had previously. So, I mean, I think it's just me trying to control my environment, basically, right? My body environment. Another thing that really helped me was like mental training and habits around like lists. Because again, since you can't necessarily trust your brain sometimes because of T3 or whatever, leaving breadcrumb trails for myself is a habit that I absolutely still use. I still am a big list taker because it lets me let go of things. I mean, they call it churning, but it's like when you're constantly like, oh, there's something else I'm not remembering. Da, da, da. It's like when I have that list, I just put it on the list and I know it's on the list and I don't think about it again. And then I go back to my list. That was something, it sounds so basic, but it was something that I already kind of did, but I got way more into that because of the winter, because I was like, I can't trust my brain the way I used to be able to trust it. Like, not in a horrible way, but I just knew that I had to have systems for myself. It really helped me.
I think we've both been talking about this in a really personal way, which it is kind of a personal battle when you're in a winter in Antarctica to keep your spirits up. You know, we talk a lot about Antarctica community. We're part of it. We love that Antarctica community. And there are lots of ways that the community acts to take care of itself too. And a lot of that comes in forms of making sure that there's a band night that people can go to, that there's live music, or putting together a gathering that is special meaning because it's a fun theme. I don't know, there's many themes that parties can take. There is an aspect of people taking care of each other. Of course, there are people who volunteer as peer counselors and who look out for each other, but it takes the form of fun things that we do. And even kind of watching the mood or the flow of the community. I know because I've been one of those people, and I know the people who also kind of see that station's down and that something needs to happen and are intervening on behalf of the station and everybody's mental health to make those things happen. So I salute all the people who have been part of that, because when you're in a winter in Antarctica, it's not just cold survival, it's mental survival that you're all sort of in together too.
So I love that you talked about that with creativity, because we have the craft room and I loved the craft room. And so it's a room full of crafts. Ooh. And you can go in there and get all kinds of different materials, make different things. And it was really a great way to not only create, but have that community around creating, as you were saying. You know, like I might be in there as the volunteer opening up the room or whatever, but I'm teaching somebody else how to use a sewing machine, for example, or that kind of thing. And so there's certain people actually that I never really interacted with other than the craft room. It was pretty random, but it was great. And that kind of creativity gives you something to look forward to. And I think that's one of the big things with the mental health is like, even if it does feel like Groundhog Day every day, can you find little things to look forward to? And sometimes the answer is no, but can you start to create those or draw on that community to help you create that together? And that was something that always helped me get through, for sure. Not just get through, but appreciate it, you know?
And, in a community as large, it's not large in the grand scheme of things, but McMurdo in a winter is clocking in at about 150 people, which is really big for an Antarctica winter community. In that environment, part of my mental health was just knowing that there's a ton of people I don't know and that there's a ton of things that those people know about that I don't know about. Like, I'm not a craft room person, but I did spend a day or two in the craft room trying to learn something new. And that was just, for me, variety. For some people, mental health is routine, and a routine that can be predictable and comforting. For me, that is the opposite of mental health. If I have a routine that seems like it's going to stretch out forever, that is not for me. So for me, seeking out variety, and that variety came in the form of people, really helped me get through some winters. I don't like things being the same. I hate things being a routine. That drives me, it's not for me.
I mean, I like a blend. I like a blend of both. Like I like a little bit of structure, and then within that structure to be able to blossom. Yeah, that's a good point about just getting to know different people, because there's definitely some very interesting folks down there. And it just helps you really appreciate those good relationships and those things that we did have going for us, which were very special and really interesting and unique, And I think that the last thing that I wanted to talk about with this was kind of in what I was calling the doldrums of the winter, kind of July times, was being aware and cognizant of complaining or the way that we were perceiving what we were going through. Again, even going through is kind of like what I call victim language, is like, I'm going through it. I'm just getting through it. It's like, so we, Yeah, we got to do the thing. But I noticed, especially my first winter, I think there was a couple of studies that had come out because they had been studying people who wintered in Antarctica, because it's basically, they're thinking, okay, well, this is like being in a space station or something like this. So this is kind of we're that petri dish, basically. So there were some interesting studies that came out about internal and external locus of control. And it got me really interested in, again, how our perspective changes our perception and our, not just reality, but our experience. So internal locus of control is, things happen to me, I'm just getting through it, all these kinds of things. Or sorry, that's external locus of control. And then internal locus of control is like, well, this is what I control and this is what I don't control. And so I will focus on the things that I can control, and then that will shape my experience. So for example, what we were talking about with, the doldrums of July, of the people who really struggled were the ones who wanted to sit around and complain about the program, complain about the leadership team, complain about the food, complain about all these kinds of things. I think they had a very challenging experience because of that. And it's not that the complaining doesn't happen. Obviously, like there's a difference between venting and complaining, but if you just keep focusing on that stuff, that is all you're going to see. And that was probably one of the biggest things around mental health for me, was being really cognizant of that and being as careful as I could be. I will be the first to admit that I was definitely a complainer in many instances. I don't think I got as bad as I could have. And that was probably the biggest thing that helped me with my mental health down there.
A community can spiral down or a community can spiral up. And when you're a part of a community that's spiraling down, oh my gosh, that is not going to be the most fun time of your life. It can make a desperate situation feel even more desperate.
I guess, that's our episode. That's basically the things that we did to support our mental health in Antarctica, both physically, mentally, and maybe even spiritually to a degree. How we not just got through it, but got lessons out of it and made it into some very powerful and unique and interesting experiences that I would never give up. I don't know if you would, but they're very core to who I am as a person, and I'm very grateful for those.
Such good lessons. I just wanted to say that I've really enjoyed this conversation with you, and it's fun to talk about some of the things that we experienced as winter overs. And I also know that we've been getting a lot of feedback from people. So thanks to everybody who's been giving us comments about the content of this podcast. But one of the common things that I'm hearing is that people want to jump into this conversation with us. And I just want to invite listeners out there to please do jump into this conversation. If you've got questions or things you want to add, put them in any of the places that we're accepting comments. We're not really picky right now. We're on a lot of platforms. We're on a lot of social media, but we're listening, and we'd love for you to be a part of these conversations. If you've got something to say and we get good listener feedback, we're going to share that listener feedback going forward. So don't be shy. Reach out. Cassa and I are very friendly people. I hope you're getting that from us. So we'd love for you to be part of a conversation like this too, even if you want to talk about ways that, some of these topics apply to your non-Antarctica life.
And that's actually our call to action for this episode as well, is thinking about any kind of easy changes or things that you can do to support your mental health. So again, it doesn't have to be a winter in Antarctica. It could be physiological changes. It could be attitude or perception changes. Where can you look for just a little tweak that doesn't have to, it's a penguin hops, like a little, not a baby step, but a penguin hop. What little tweak can you maybe make that's going to help with your mental health? And we invite you to take a look for those things.
Join us, guys. We're really enjoying talking about all of this stuff. So we can't wait to hear from you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Antarctica Did That For Me podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support our efforts, we would love it if you would tell your friends. And if you leave us a review on Spotify or Apple, it will help us find more of our fellow adventurers. We release a new episode every Tuesday, and we are a video and audio podcast, so you can watch or just listen. We're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and more, or find everything, including links to our social media, at our website, antarcticadidthatforme.com. Thanks again for listening, and until next week, keep thinking about what opening your own heart to adventure could do for you.